Welcome to Mental Health Momentum, the Silicon Slopes podcast. I am Dr. David Morgan. I'm a licensed psychologist and the Director of Mental Health Awareness here at Silicon Slopes. And in these podcasts, we talk about the impact of mental health issues on individuals and businesses and look for solutions as well. My guest today is Caitlin Hansen. Let me introduce her. Caitlin is a former broadcast journalist and venture capitalist who spent 16 years in the high-pressure corporate world. Her lifelong love for holistic health and wellness led her to co-found Mindless Labs, where she combines her professional expertise with a deep commitment to mental wellness. Alongside Chris Magleby, Caitlin is building a company that embodies her passion for creating meaningful change. Outside of work, she finds her flow in the embrace of Mother Nature, on top of a peak, skis, or a motorcycle. Caitlin, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, David. Dr. David? Dr. Morgan. How would you like me to refer to you?
David is great.
Great.
If I'm charging someone, it's Dr. Morgan,
Okay,
so we can
good.
do it that way. But this is all free. On top of peaks, skis. Are you getting excited then with
I am.
the winter weather that we're getting now?
Yes, all the ski films are coming out. We went and saw the
Yes.
Warren Miller film last week, and I'm definitely ready. Fall's been beautiful and great, but
Yeah.
when the snow starts to fly,
It was
I'm
about
a
a
happy
week, right?
woman.
Fall this year was that?
Yeah, it was. It was pretty warm, pretty late here.
Exactly. Have you lived in Utah long? Skiing long?
I moved here just before high school. I've left and come back a handful of times, so I've been back for about 15 years.
Okay, that is awesome. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Besides that, what else? What's something people would be interested in knowing about you?
Well, I used to sit in this room we're in right now
That's
every
true.
day for work. It's fun to be back here. And on this side of it, you're interviewing me, which is an exciting thing. You mentioned I spent 15 years in broadcast journalism. So I called Silicon Slopes my home for a little bit of time and did some of the broadcasting work with Clint here. And it's a good place to be. So I'm happy to be back in the hot seat, this time on the other side of the microphone.
Right.
You drilling me. So I'm a little more nervous on this side. I don't have control over where this conversation is going as much.
So why did you make the switch from broadcast journalism to what you're doing now?
I always knew I wanted to be a journalist. So to go back to like junior high school, my dad actually kind of highlighted, he's like hated public speaking. He was a president of a company and like dreaded it so much. And so I think for him, it stood out that I never had a problem with it in junior high and high school, being part of the student council. And I loved writing and kind of that whole world. So I went into journalism knowing from a young age that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to tell stories and I'm very curious. So kind of get into that journalistic role. And it was a great career. I absolutely loved working. I worked for CBS News here in Salt Lake City and a station in Dallas, Texas as well for a little bit in the middle of my career in journalism. And I loved it. And I just got to a point where I felt like I wanted something different. And it was a really nice transition. I actually came straight here to Silicon Slopes, which was great. It was like a little bit of a softer transition because I was still broadcasting a little bit here. And then actually left here and went and worked in venture capital for a couple of years, which was a hard swing from what I was doing in journalism, which is more creative and everything, to more of like the financial analytical world. But still was able to tap into my communication skills there and run the investor relations side of that business. All along the way, I run a consulting business, still do it today, which is executive public speaking and communications consulting. So I still get to keep my hands in the public speaking world a little bit and help others feel more confident in the spotlight. But the startup life kind of called and fell into my lap, and it feels like the thing I didn't know I was missing, right?
Really?
Like, so trying to plug myself into systems and being a cog in the wheel for most of my career, working with a team and building something from the ground up has been, it's just like everything clicked. And to be able to do it with a friend of mine as my co-founder, and then also to be able to do something that I feel so much passion behind, and I'm so driven to wake up every day and go to the office and move this thing that we're building forward. It just feels like I'm in the right place at the right time.
I love that story because so many times people will make career switches because they're dissatisfied, right? They're just upset with it. They feel like they're in a dead end situation. And it doesn't sound like it was like that for you. You just thought it was just time for something different. You enjoyed what you were doing, but you were looking for something more. And so many of the people that I work with as a psychologist, they're just so afraid. They're running from things instead of running towards things.
Totally.
Right. And it's just such a desperate way to live, and from the observer view, you can't really tell the difference. You look at that person and say, oh, that person's so motivated. Look at what they're doing. But internally, it's a very different experience to be working in kind of this deficit model where you're just constantly trying to fill something, fill a need that's not being met, as opposed to trying to meet a need that just an aspirational need.
Mm-hmm. I definitely loved my career in journalism. With every role, I think you find burnout, and I'm
Sure.
trying to be better about that in the chapter that I'm in right now. But the actual job, I loved what I was doing. And you're totally right. It was just, there's something else out there. And I felt like my career was complete in journalism, ironically, because I thought it would do it forever, but
Right.
I listened to that. And this is not me saying that I have it all together and I did that. I definitely ran from things more probably in my personal life for years and years until I got to a place where I was running toward dreams instead of away from things maybe I was afraid of and didn't
Right.
want to look at. But yeah, on the career front, I've been chasing whatever feels right. And I feel like I've definitely landed in that right now.
Let's talk about Mindless Labs a little bit, because this is what caught my interest as I look for guests, and I saw you doing this mental health sort of thing. So from broadcast journalism to venture capital to mental health. So what is Mindless Labs? What does it do? How did you get the idea?
Well, I didn't specifically get the idea. My business partner and dear friend Chris
Okay.
Magleby, there's a lot of synchronicities that happened over about a 6-month span to get us to actually diving in and working together. Neither of which either of us really knew was going on behind the scenes in both of our subconscious. But he finally, after about 6 months of us both like being on each other's minds and seeing each other as friends, approached me one day and proposed this idea of what was not at the time called Mindless Labs, but of what we are now creating. And we've pivoted and some things have shifted a little bit, but it was born out of something. He's actually written a book that's going to come out in about a year, and he experienced his story to tell, but high level, and a period of psychosis.
Hmm.
And that sent him down a rabbit hole, digging for information and looking for resources that are out there to help support him and make him feel seen and not crazy. Or if he was crazy, help him like lend him a hand to pull
Sure.
him through and get to the other side of it. And he fortunately did, and pulled all these resources together and has compiled a beautiful book that I've had the honor of reading. And I'm so excited for everyone to be able to read when it comes out in a year. And then with that, he's like, we need to help more people. And as he started sharing his story, more and more people kept saying, I need help too. What can you offer me? So that was kind of the genesis initially of the entire business. And it's definitely launched from there. We've been working almost a year together, getting this off the ground. We have a fun office in Salt Lake City now. And there's a group of us working on this. And right now we have a platform online. So our social medias and our website are resources, tools, inspiration, support for those
Right.
that are experiencing anxiety, depression, and feel like they need help. So you can go there right now to our lab, which has a bunch of articles and everything from therapists, anywhere from holistic healers all the way to licensed clinical therapists and everything in between. So you can go and you can get the mindfulness, the breath work, the meditation that there is a lot of out there. And if that's not for you, there's something that is more science backed that may
Right.
resonate. So what we're trying to do, and we will be launching an app and apparel line that supports the app coming up in May, actually, for Mental Health Awareness Month next year. It seems like it's so far away, but it's going to be here really
It will
quickly.
be close.
And we're really excited about it. So it's not acute care, so you
Right.
wouldn't dial in and have a therapist on call, and it's
Right. It's
also
not like
not.
988 or anything like
Mm-mm.
that. Yeah.
Nope, those resources are amazing, and we
Right.
support them, and we push people there if they're in an acute crisis
Right.
needing moment. But we are here to get people a little further up the funnel,
Right.
before they need that acute care. I'll actually tell you a story that is a parable that is something that we kind of live by and are trying to really be the heartbeat of what we're doing. Have you ever heard of the parable of the river with the monks
I
on the
don't
side of the
know.
river? So
No, I don't think so.
I'll tell it really quickly, but there's a village where these monks live on the side of the river, and they're all sitting on the river meditating one day, and they start to notice that all of these people are floating down the river and they're drowning. And all the monks, almost all of them, jump in the river and start pulling people out. And one of the monks in the river looks up on the riverbed and sees another monk just standing there. And he yells to him as the guy starts to walk away, and he says, we need your help. Why aren't you in the river helping us pull people out? And he says, I'm going to go upstream and find out why they're falling in. And so that's something that we've really tried to focus on. We've kind of shined the spotlight on us now that we're vocal and out in the world, where people are coming to us when they are in those more acute need
Yeah.
times. And we want to help people, obviously, and offer what we can or direct them to 988 or other resources that are available. But we're trying to get up the stream a little bit further. And when people are feeling that anxiety and that depression come on before it escalates
Right.
to a moment of crisis or self-harm, how can we help there? Is it through mindfulness? Is it through practices that you can get with a therapist when you're one-on-one with them, but you could also do on your own
Right.
without a therapist sitting there? And so our board of therapists and healers are helping us to create these courses and practices to have in our app so that you can do it in the comfort of your own home. It's going to give you free access so that you don't have the barrier of waiting in line to get in to see
Right.
someone, the financial barrier, the stigma that's around mental health care. So there's my long-winded answer for you. That is Mindless Lab. We just want to have a thriving humanity of mental health and mental well-being.
I love the story. Or I love what you're doing in the first place. And I love the story as well because preventative care it's something that we're having a hard time figuring out, especially in mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Physical health, I think we're kind of getting that, 10,000 steps or whatever it is, do your exercise, healthy eating habits. But mental health, it's like, what do you do to prevent that? And how do you become aware of that? I love mindfulness for that reason because
Mm-hmm.
it helps us be in tune with what we're thinking, what we're experiencing, and on a moment to moment basis. And then if you can see that in real time as that's happening to you, then you can start to see these symptoms happen way before they get to the point of needing, formal mental health care, which is great for some people. But I really think that a lot of these things could be prevented if we just took care of ourselves in certain ways up the river, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's great. And I think it's a great way as well if people get into that and then maybe they realize maybe this is great, but maybe I do need more, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm.
I do need more. And it's kind of almost a self-triage sort of thing. And they say, self-help isn't going to be enough for me. I need to reach out to someone. And then there's, resources where they can find out, how to get connected with people and stuff. So I think that's awesome. Good
Thank
for you.
you.
So it was your coworker's brainchild, but why did you resonate with
I mean,
it?
I would argue, although the statistic is that 1 in 5 people struggle with anxiety or
Yeah.
depression, I would argue that's the people that are seeking counsel or
100%.
reporting it.
Those are usually diagnosed cases.
Right,
So they've been to a
absolutely.
counselor, they've
Mhm.
been formally diagnosed, and so that percentage is much higher.
And the reason I kind of chuckled and laughed is because I would say me,
Yeah,
you, everyone
exactly.
listening to this has struggled at some point or another. And to what degree is definitely changing for every circumstance. But of course, I've struggled with my own mental health issues, struggles, and gone in and out of those throughout my life. So it definitely resonated with me because there's people around me that I watch struggle. It's been, in my friends, in my family, in the workplace, you hear all the time. And it's one of the things that as we dive into this work, it kind of started with this like joyous, blissful idea of like, let's save the world,
Right.
this pipe dream of what we're going to do and how big of an impact this can make. But with all of that hope and excitement for giving and helping people heal comes the heartache that you have to look at.
Yeah.
And even before I dove into this, I understood, unfortunately, some of that heartache with people close to me in my life and a little bit of the heartache from my experiencing on its own. So, and my friend who is my business partner, hearing what he's been through and the struggle that he went through to pull himself out of those
Yeah.
darker times is such an inspiration. And if we can get people further up in the funnel and we can figure out why they're falling in the river for the most part, then hopefully it can help us inch toward that
Hmm.
humanity where we're thriving and mental well-being and mental wellness is more of the standard.
Right. Right.
And we're not waiting until we're not okay to dive into it, right? It's one of the
Right.
things you can compare within the health world, like you were talking about. Physical fitness is part of your mental health as well, but
Right.
most of us go to the doctor in America or around the world when we're ill
Right.
and we want them to fix us. But what if we started to optimize now? Well, I'm not sick, so maybe I'll start eating cleaner and moving my
Right.
body and working on my mental health now so that when I get to a point where illness comes into my life or something happens in my world that's out of my control, I could spiral, but I have all of these habits in place so that I'm a little bit more equipped to
Yeah.
tackle those moments.
I, I love that because I think the medical model is driving the mental health model as well because we don't go to the doctor when we feel well, right?
Mhm.
I mean, you get your annual checkups, maybe, right? I have I had LASIK like 7 years ago. I wore corrective lenses before that. And when the guy did my LASIK, he said, make sure you go to the optometrist every year to get your eyes
Mm-hmm.
checked. I haven't. I
Come
haven't gone. I know
on,
I need
David.
to. I know. I keep thinking about it. I'm like, okay, I need to go. I need to go. But it's because there's nothing wrong.
Yeah.
Because my eyes work fine, right? And I don't have to put on my glasses and don't need a new prescription for contacts or anything like that. But I know it's important as well. And it's seriously on my mind. I'm going to make that appointment today after this.
Good.
Yeah.
I'm going to call you and
You
make sure you
should and
get
say,
it.
hey, when's your optometrist appointment? I also loved when you're talking about Chris and Chris, right? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
your co-founder. And where he was saying he was sharing his story and it was, and people started to resonate with that. I think that's social media is a blessing and a curse because in one way, it's amazing that we're getting connected with people. Another way, it's created this comparison that creates so much angst for people. But what it does is it allows people to say, there's someone out there like me who is struggling with the same things I am. And we get connected with people that we didn't even know existed, right? You're probably too young, but there was a song by Blind Melon called No Rain, and you don't know the video. One of the producers in here does.
Maybe
I know.
sing it, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. And it starts with this little girl at a talent show and she's dressed in a bee costume and she does this little tap dance and it's really cringy and everyone just laughs at her. And it's so
Aw.
sad. And so she walks away. She's super sad. In the meantime, the music is playing. It's a great song. And she ends up wandering into this meadow and finding a bunch of people dressed exactly like her. And so she goes and she dances with them and she's just so happy, right? That she found the bee costume people, right? And I think about that all the time when I think about how now we're connecting with people in very specific ways that before, if your neighbor didn't have those same characteristics, then who are you going to talk to,
Right.
right? Or whatever group you happen to belong to. I think that's great. And I'm glad that your co-founder had the courage to talk about those things because otherwise this would be in his brain still and you'd still be in broadcast journalism probably or venture capital. That's right. That's what was said.
It is interesting. I think so much from my experience of my healing is feeling seen
Mhm.
and being loved for exactly who I am and not having to hide that. And I think that a lot of us suffer in silence and think I'm the only one that this is happening to. And I don't want to be a burden on other people. And people are going to think I'm crazy. And, one of the taglines of our business is the safest place to lose your mind. And it's like, we're all crazy and we're all going
Exactly.
crazy and we're all losing our mind. Chris has a friend that he was sitting next to once and he said he shared that I think I'm losing my mind. I'm afraid I'm going to end up in a loony bin. And her response was, well, we're all going to be in there puzzling together
That's
someday
right.
next to each other. And, if some of us are in a phase where we're doing well and we haven't, flowed through the river to the phase where we're on a low point again, then that's great. And maybe that's what you see out there. But there are people that are cycling in and out of this journey just like you are. And if we can just highlight some of those stories and make people feel like they belong, regardless of where they are in that cycle, then I think that's one of the steps toward
Right.
healing.
Well, and normalizing it as well. We're recording this at the beginning of November and we're coming up on the holidays, right?
Yeah.
And which for some people is amazing. Some people,
Right.
they turn on their Christmas music at 12:01, November 1st
I
and
know,
put up their
not me.
Christmas tree.
Well, there's all of the marketing around it and like
Totally.
Stuff is already out in the summer and it's like this joyous holiday, but there's like an underbelly to it that is not always joyous.
Right.
For
And
people.
for some, yeah, exactly. For some people, it's because it is about family and some people's family relationships are
Mhm.
very, very complicated. And it's time where they have to get together because it's somewhat of an obligation. What would you recommend? I know you're not an expert.
I'm
but-
like, you're the doctor
That's
here.
right.
Remember, I do not have any initials before my name.
What would you recommend for someone who's feeling unique in that situation, who just says, I don't know what to do. I hate the holidays and I'm not exactly sure where to go. I mean, that's a very open-ended question.
I know. I'm like, where do I start? I mentioned we have the lab, which is
Yeah.
the kind of where the blog space lives on our website, and we have art, musings, articles from therapists and healers, practices on there, and we have a queue of them coming up. And I've read through a couple of them, and they deal with this. They talk. One of the things that one of our clinicians talks about is boundaries. This forced pressure we feel during the holidays to be happy, to see family, to buy everyone gifts. if we're in financial crisis and that feels heavy to us
Right.
to have this obligation to show up and give, physical things, right? Because it's such a commercialized holiday.
Right.
How does that pressure affect us? And if you just sit down with yourself, again, this I'm repeating, this is not my birth child, what I'm saying here, but what I've learned from our clinicians, sitting down and finding out what feels good to you and what could make these holidays feel good to you. And if you need to set boundaries around those things, then that's your obligation and your commitment to
Right.
yourself. Does family feel good to you or bad to you? And where is that line? And how can you show up and still honor yourself? Or do you show up at all? Is giving a gift and being stressed financially actually what you should be doing for you at the holidays? Only you can know that. Can you give your time? Can you give love in other ways that are as meaningful, if not more, than
Right.
a gift bag of something? Another thing you mentioned a little bit earlier is we were talking is seasonal depression.
Yeah.
And that is very real. I have some people very close with me that deal with that every year. And it's not something to joke about. They have sad lights you can sit in front of in the morning. And there's an article come out that I will botch that is on our lab, but talks about, mimicking some of the things that you do in the summer, in the winter, to help kind of almost trick your mind. And right, we talk about how powerful our mindset is and our thoughts and how we become a product of what we're thinking all the time. And if those are negative thoughts spiraling about, I hate winter, it's cold. I mean, these don't come to me because I'm just excited about
Ready
the
for the
snow.
snow. Yeah.
But it's very real.
Yep.
Like the cold weather, the darker mornings, the darker evenings, the loneliness that comes with a lot of the holidays is kind of like a magnifying glass for some people on the fact that, maybe their family isn't around. Maybe they aren't partnered. Maybe they do live alone. But how can we do things? My mom sent me a message jokingly after she read that article the other day. She said, I'm going to turn the heat up in my house to 80 and start walking around in a bikini and gardening. I'm like, call me because I want to be a part of this. But what can we do to kind of pick ourselves up in little ways and change our thought process? Walk outside when it's snowing and freezing and you hate it and say to yourself, I love winter. Even if it's sarcastic, start to implement those things to have positive thought in the ways that we can.
That's great counsel. And I do have letters after my name, and I endorse that wholeheartedly.
Good.
That sounds
Well,
great.
again, I'm just
what
feeding
you
off
repeated
of other
for those people. Yeah, that sounds amazing. All of our reality is completely subjective anyway, right? I mean, it's just how we interpret things. And like you talked about the power of our mind.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's so critical that we learn to manage that, and we can manage that. We can be in control of that. I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about mental health is that people think, well, this is just something that happens to me. And it's not. You do have control. Now, I'm not saying you control everything, that someone with seasonal affective disorder, that they can just today decide, I'm not going to be depressed this winter. That probably won't happen. But my guess is with intervention, they could be less depressed than they would otherwise be. My wife and I were vacationing in Orlando last week, and we were at Epcot and watching a fireworks show at the end of the night. And I'm sitting there, and it was beautiful. It was lovely. It was a new one I hadn't seen before, and I'm tempted to look at my watch because I'm thinking, how long is this thing going to last? And then I just thought, I'm not going to look at my watch because I'm just going to enjoy this moment right now, right? Regardless of how long this lasts, it doesn't matter what the Skyliner is going to be like as we have to get home or what the wait is tomorrow or anything like that. I'm just going to enjoy this moment. And that's been something that's a challenge for me because I'm constantly forward looking and I'm thinking about what's next, but just to sit and enjoy that moment. And it was a great experience just to have that, even just that 20 minutes, which is about how long it was, of just real joy. And I think that people can find that even in the holidays, which may not be your favorite. My guess is there's something joyful about that you can find, even if it's the joy of setting a boundary and not having to go to Thanksgiving, right?
Yeah.
Then you appreciate that joy and you say, because I set a boundary and did this, or the joy of knowing that how glad you're going to be when it's over or something like that, focusing on that instead of focusing on the negative or the sad. We have the power to focus our minds where we want to. It takes practice for sure. That's where the mindfulness comes in, is learning how to train ourselves to control our minds, because usually it just kind of rolls right past us without practice.
Have you ever read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's
Yes.
Search for Meaning? For me, if anyone's listening and you haven't read that, it's a hard read.
Yeah.
It's pretty heavy, but that is the most impactful thing I've ever read about the power of our mindset, and that he could be in
He was in a concentration camp.
death camp,
Yeah.
and find the strength within him to
Yeah.
see like the beauty and the joy in an everyday situation that is an absolute horrendous situation to be in. And I try to remember that, when things feel heavy, because they do for everyone, is that I control so much of my own mood, and you can't control what's happening to you, but you can control how you think about it and what you do about it.
Right.
And if you can get in a habit, like I said, when things are good, of working on that mental strength, so that when things are hard, you have practiced and you have that strength. It's like going to the gym, right? You can't just
100%,
show up and do an Ironman.
Right.
You've got to train for it.
And our minds are the exact same way. Yeah, 100%. So people that are fearing the holidays, that's our advice. Gear up, get ready, get a plan, right? Say, this is what, take control. This isn't something just has to happen to you. Say, this is what I'm going to do. These are the boundaries I'm going to set. I'm going to find whatever happiness I can in this. And to also accept the fact that that's not going to turn everything on its head. And this isn't going to be the most amazing 8 weeks that you've ever had. It won't. But it'll probably be a less miserable 8 weeks than it was last year and the year before. You do have power to manage that. Mindless.org. Mindless.org. Okay.
That's our website. We've got a lot of information on there. Again, we redirect you to resources where you can find a therapist one-on-one if you need telehealth or acute care. 988 is on there, the suicide hotline, if you do need those kind of resources. But we've got, one of the resources we've added recently on there is a 51 book reading list, which could be a great gift idea for the holidays for people in your life. It's got every single category of mental wellness and health that you could want on there that we've gathered from practitioners on mental health and self-love. That's on there. And anxiety.
A great gift for yourself.
Yeah,
right.
One of those
exactly.
books. An anxiety survival guide, just with little everyday tips. It's interesting. I work in this world. I've worked in health and fitness. I've done a lot of my own work on my emotional body and somatic healing. And when I have massive anxiety, I just sit here and I'm like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, I have all these resources. So something even for me, like our anxiety survival guide is good, because when I'm in that moment, I don't even know how to help myself, right? But I can go look at this step-by-step thing when my brain is offline and say, okay, what do I do now? And sometimes it's like literally the simple things. It's like, have you drank any water today, Caitlin? And oftentimes the answer is no. Have I moved my body? Can I go outside and just breathe in some fresh air? Do I need to see my therapist? I don't want to negate the fact that there's a lot of people out there that need acute care and have mental illness that is very serious, that breath work isn't going to help with. But all of these things can support you along that journey. And we do have a lot of clinical and science-backed things on our lab and on the app soon to be that will help with those things as well.
Okay. Mindless.org. Go there. Get geared up for the holidays. Get mentally prepped for the holidays there.
And emotionally fit.
And emotionally fit, exactly, for this upcoming stuff. Thank you, Caitlin. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks so much, David.
Thanks for tuning in, and keep joining us for future episodes where we will increase together our mental health momentum.